Chapter 1491. During the ceremony, lots were going to be drawn at random by the machine, and the seated participants were decided based on popularity among the general public rather than any official jurisdiction. As such, it wouldn't be impossible for powerful beings to be pitted against one another, and it was precisely because of this that the ceremony drew even more attention. Those who made it into the final 10 wouldn't have any further opportunities to clash, as the choice would be up to the Silver Dragon Princess Guyuna then. So the round robin stage was the most important. Tang Wolin was currently resting with his eyes closed. His sickly, sleep-deprived appearance wasn't something that was feigned. He was truly slightly under the weather. Something had gone wrong during his heavenly refinement the previous day. An elemental tribulation had suddenly erupted, causing the piece of metal to explode, and the infernal lightning vine had also reached the limit of its tolerance range. In order to protect the infernal lightning vine, Tang Wolin had been forced to bear the brunt of the elemental tribulation, and even with his physical constitution he had been dealt a very heavy blow. Thankfully, he had managed to save the infernal lightning vine, and it was currently digesting the tribulation lightning. According to Tang Wolin's own estimation, he wouldn't be able to attempt any further heavenly refinement for at least 3 days. During this recent period of time, he had been attempting heavenly refinement with excessive regularity, to the point that even his body as the son of nature was struggling to keep up with all the elemental tribulation he had to endure. Even Zhen Hua had advised him to take a break, and it wasn't a bad idea to take advantage of this opportunity to participate in the round robin stage. Welcome, gentlemen. I am Kaiangyu Dongfeng. Right at this moment, Kaiangyu Dongfeng's clear voice rang out, instantly attracting everyone's attention. The image of Kaiangyu Dongfeng appeared on the big screen, and Guyuna was standing right beside him. She was wearing a long black dress that made her long silver hair look particularly resplendent. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate you all on behalf of the Spirit Pagoda for making it to the final 100. The fact that you've progressed to this point is a testament to your ability, and you can be proud in the knowledge that you're the most exceptional cultivators among the younger generation in the entire Federation. At the same time, you've secured the prizes that our Spirit Pagoda announced prior to the commencement of the event, and you'll receive those prizes at the event's conclusion. You've all been gathered here today for the lots drawing ceremony. In order to ensure fairness, we've invited the Vice Hall Master of the Battle God Hall to oversee the proceedings, and I wish you all luck in the upcoming round robin stage, which will commence tomorrow. I'm sure you're all very tired after enduring the elimination stage matches, so I won't waste any more of your time. After the ceremony ends, go back and have a good rest so you can compete in the rest of the event in your best condition. Naya, I'll let you do the honors. Guyuna nodded and announced, "Let the ceremony begin." Her voice was very pleasant, and it drew one in on a subconscious level. Tang Wolin looked up at the big screen, and his gaze naturally focused on Guyuna. A faint smile appeared on his face, and he crossed his arms as the air rippled slightly around him. "Wait for me, Gu Yue." Following her announcement, the machine beneath the screen was turned on, and the 100 small balls within it began to bounce around in an erratic manner. It was also at this moment that an elderly man descended from the heavens and hovered above the machine with his hands clasped behind his back. All of the people present were high-grade soul masters, so they could naturally sense that this elderly man was an immensely powerful being. He was the Vice Battle God Hall Master, Sky-Crossing Duoluo Guan Yue. He was one of the most seasoned veterans of the Battle God Hall and was a powerful being from the same generation as the Boundless Ocean Duoluo. At the same time, he was also a Limit Duoluo, but was slightly inferior in power to Chen Xinji. Furthermore, Guan Yue was a very understated character and wasn't a high-ranking military official like the Boundless Ocean Duoluo. He was purely a battle god and nothing else, and he very rarely appeared in the public eye. In particular, he had rarely ever been seen during the past few decades, and one could only imagine what kind of price the Spirit Pagoda had to pay in exchange for his attendance. The Sky-Crossing Duoluo hovered in midair with his eyes closed, looking as if he were asleep, but everyone was filled with awe and veneration toward him. This was a Limit Duoluo. Even though the number of Limit Duoluo in the present world far outstripped that of ancient times, there were still less than 20 powerful beings of this caliber in the entire Federation, and all of them stood at the very pinnacle of this world. The Battle God Hall was the most powerful force under the Federal Parliament, and this was precisely due to the fact that it was being spearheaded by these two Limit Duoluo. Unfortunately, none of their successors have reached the Limit Duoluo level, so once these two passed away, it was likely that the Battle God Hall would enter a slight trough. As such, the Federation was investing more and more in the younger generation of the Battle God Hall while recruiting bright young talent at all costs. The small balls continued to bounce around in the machine before entering a series of glass tubes. There were 10 tubes in total, and once a tube was filled with 10 balls it would be sealed shut. Guan Yue nodded toward the rostrum as confirmation that everything was progressing smoothly. Of course, no one was going to doubt his judgment. All Limit Duoluos had their own pride and prestige that was not to be encroached upon, and no one was under the opinion that a Limit Duoluo would renounce their own moral code over something like this. The results have been decided. The first group will consist of number 17, Han Xingxu, number 23. One name after another was called out, and everyone listened intently for which group they were in, as well as who else was in their group. Number 66, Ulong Yu. Tang Wolin was the 6th person in the third group, and his expression remained completely unchanged upon hearing this. Lan Fuozi had already been assigned to the second group, for which Tang Wolin was quite thankful. Number 88, Kaiangyu Sangting. Everyone's hearts jolted upon hearing this next name, and they all cast their eyes toward Tang Wolin and Kaiangyu Sangting. They were both undoubtedly heavy favorites to progress to the final 10, but the fact that they had been split into the same group meant that only one of them would get to advance. Of course, this was assuming that no other participant in their group could perform better than they did. Kaiangyu Sangting turned to face Tang Wolin with an intense gaze, and Tang Wolin merely looked back at him with a provocative expression, which was completely in character with his adopted identity as the arrogant young master of the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon Clan. One day ago, Brother Guan, I had no choice but to ask you for this favor. That grandson of mine is very proud and competitive, and he wants to face the most powerful competition. Many people are saying that Ulong Yu is very powerful, including Naya, so he wants to defeat him in order to win Naya's heart fair and square. I'm not asking you to rig the competition in Sangting's favor. In fact, this will only make things more difficult for him. So please do me this favor, Brother Guan. While it is indeed true that this isn't helping Sangting in any way, you're still asking me to break the rules. You shouldn't have invited me to oversee this ceremony, Guan Yue said with furrowed brows. Kaiangyu Dongfeng chuckled. It wasn't easy for me to lay down my pride and request this of you, either, Brother Guan. After a brief hesitation, Guan Yue nodded in response. All right, but you're the one asking for the rules to be broken. If something happens, I take no responsibility. Of course. Thank you, Brother Guan. The news that the young master of the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon Clan and Spirit Envoy Kaiangyu Sangting of the Spirit Pagoda had been allocated to the same group instantly created a massive stir. Countless people all over the continent had their eyes glued to their television screens, and all of them were looking forward to this epic showdown. There was no lack of title Duoluos who had made it to the final 100, but there weren't many among them who were young and handsome as well. Yet Ulong Yu and Kaiangyu Sangting definitely both satisfied those criteria. Chapter 1492. Tang Wolin raised his chin toward Kaiangyu Sangting, whereas the latter merely gave him a faint smile in a more refined display. Even though Tang Wolin was in disguise, his adopted identity of Ulong Yu was also very handsome, and the two of them created a stark contrast in which an arrogant display was clashing with a refined demeanor. Lan Fuozi was also appraising Tang Wolin, yet the fury in her eyes had been replaced by a rather peculiar expression. After that, the group allotments continued, and there were some other instances of powerful beings allocated to the same group, but none quite as exciting as the Tang Wolin and Kaiangyu Sangting duo. According to the information that had been prepared for Tang Wolin, there were 23 title Duoluos, 56 soul Duoluos, and 21 soul sages among the final 100. As such, the majority of the final 100 were comprised of soul Duoluos, while the 21 soul sages were all very lucky in that they didn't encounter any powerful opponents in the elimination stage. However, in the round robin stage, they most likely had no chance of further progression. There were 4 title Duoluos in total in Tang Wolin and Kaiangyu Sangting's group, but the other 2 title Duoluos were significantly older than them. This outcome fully convinced the general public that this was indeed a fair event. Even the Spirit Pagoda chairman's grandson had been allocated to such a difficult group. How could anyone accuse the Spirit Pagoda of rigging the event? Ulong Yu was the young master of the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon Clan, so there was no way that he would accept a bribe from the Spirit Pagoda, and there were 2 other title Duoluos in the group as well. So if Kaiangyu Sangting could still progress to the final 10 under these circumstances, then no one would have anything to say. Thus concludes the ceremony. The round robin stage will commence tomorrow, and 1 round will be held per day. There will be 5 matches per group per round, and the matches for 2 groups will take place each day, all in this venue. Tang Wolin's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. There were a total of 10 groups, which meant that it would take 5 days to complete a single round. In order for each member of each group to battle everyone else in their group once, there would have to would be 9 rounds per group, which meant that it would take 45 days to decide the final 10. It was the first time that he had encountered such a lengthy tournament format. The Spirit Pagoda was undoubtedly doing this to attract more attention, as well as to advertise their Myriad Beast plane. Even Tang Wulian had to admit that the Myriad Beast plane was indeed extremely alluring. It essentially did the same thing as the Spirit Ascension plane, except one wouldn't have to slaughter soul beasts in the Myriad Beast plane to reap the benefits, and there was no upper limit in the Myriad Beast plane. Go back and rest. The first round matches for the first and second groups will take place tomorrow, so please be ready. There were only going to be 10 matches per day, but due to the fact that the participants were more powerful, the matches were also going to be more spectacular, with a total duration of 45 days. The Spirit Pagoda would be able to make a massive profit from ticket sales alone. Furthermore, the matches could be arranged so that there was at least one match between titled duo per day to generate even more interest. Thus, all of the remaining participants began to depart from the competition platform, and all of a sudden, Tang Wulian lowered his own center of gravity before quickly stepping to the side. Humph. A cold harumph rang out, and his shoulder was still caught in a firm grasp in the end. A burst of suction force was released by the hand on his shoulder, preventing him from getting away. Can I help you? Tang Wulian turned around in a resigned manner. He already knew who it was based on the aura alone. Lan Foizia appraised him with a cold expression, and said, "You should be thanking your lucky stars that you're not in my group. Otherwise, I beat you so hard even your mother wouldn't recognize you." Tang Wulian's expression immediately fell upon hearing his mother being mentioned. "If you only stopped me to make empty threats, then piss off and go make these threats to the people in your group instead." Lan Foizia faltered slightly upon hearing this. With her spirit domain realm spiritual power, she could naturally sense the sudden shift in Tang Wulian's mood. She released his shoulder, and asked in a cold voice, "Are you confident that you can beat that guy?" Tang Wulian replied in an indifferent manner, "Of course, just like I'm confident that I can beat you." Lan Foizia gave a disdainful harumph. "Talk is cheap. How about we go somewhere for a fight?" "Not interested." Tang Wulian turned and departed without a second thought. Lan Foizia was furious to see this, and she immediately darted around to stop Tang Wulian in his tracks. "Don't think that I'll just let you off the hook for what happened that day." Tang Wulian's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. "What do you intend to do? Do you want to thank me for saving your life? How are you going to thank me? With your body? How dare you?" Lan Foizia was instantly reminded of that awkward ordeal, and she thrust a palm toward Tang Wulian's chest in a fit of rage. The surrounding air currents instantly became extremely viscous, and Tang Wulian was struck by a brief sense of asphyxiation, as if he had been plunged into a deep sea abyss. What was even more terrifying was that the area around him seemed to have been transformed into a vacuum, within which he was unable to breathe, nor sense the presence of any elements. All he could feel was the terrifying air currents hurtling directly toward his chest. Not only was this palm imbued with rotational vortex-like power, it was also very strange in that the vortex and the palm were revolving in different directions, creating a burst of compression force that threatened to crush his body into mincemeat. Tang Wulian's expression changed slightly upon seeing this. He had always known that Lan Foizia was very powerful, but he didn't think that she would be this powerful. This attack had clearly already exceeded the realm of his body's normal defensive capabilities, which meant that it posed an actual threat to him. He gave a cold harumph as he stomped his right foot down onto the ground, and a burst of enormous pressure rose up all around his body. This was gravitational control. As he had become more powerful, his gravitational control had also become more potent, and the two vortexes abruptly sank as if they had been dragged down by some type of mysterious force. At the same time, Tang Wulian threw a straight punch. Bluish-purple scales appeared all over the surface of his fist, and arcs of lightning converged to form a ball of lightning that exploded violently. Boom! The two of them were still in the Bright City Sports Stadium, and following the resounding clash, Tang Wulian's body swayed slightly from the rotational power of the vortexes, while Lan Foizia was forced back a couple of steps. Powerful shockwaves erupted in all directions, and all of the surrounding participants instantly scattered in an alarmed manner. They weren't overly familiar with Lan Foizia, but they had all witnessed Tang Wulian's powerful displays during the elimination stage, and none of them wanted to be caught up in his attack. As it turned out, they were right to take evasive measures. The shockwaves that were proliferating outward were still imbued with traces of powerful lightning, and some of the participants who didn't manage to get away in time were all instantly rooted to the spot as their bodies began to spasm uncontrollably. Furthermore, most of the energy that erupted from the clash had risen upward instead of spreading outward. Otherwise, the effect would have been even more fearsome. Chapter 1493. Lan Foizia was just about to charge toward Tang Wulian again when a figure descended from above. "Stop. No fighting in the Bright City Sports Stadium. If you have differences to settle, then go elsewhere to settle them." An elderly man in a Spirit Pagoda uniform had positioned himself between the two of them, extending a hand toward each of them with a wary look in his eyes. Both of them were very powerful, so if they insisted on fighting here, he would most likely struggle to stop them. Tang Wulian withdrew his arm and raised his chin toward Lan Foizia before departing. Lan Foizia gritted her teeth as she looked on at his departing figure, then stomped a foot down onto the ground with a resounding boom before also leaving. Her voice then rang out beside Tang Wulian's ears. "Just you wait." Tang Wulian merely raised his index finger above his head and wagged it in a derisive manner. Their clash had naturally been captured by the surveillance cameras within the venue, and the footage was quickly being broadcasted by all of the major media outlets to further fan the flames of the event's popularity. Apparently, Lan Foizia had once entered the Myriad Beast plane together with Ulonyu, and the two of them had somehow become enemies following that experience. Lan Foizia was at the Spirit Domain realm and was regarded as the most powerful seed in the fourth group, but neither he nor Ulonyu were able to gain the upper hand during their clash. All types of news stories and articles were being released about the incident, and many people were lamenting the fact that Tang Wulian and Lan Foizia went in the same group, which meant that no clash would take place between them in the event unless new rules were introduced for the final 10. Of course, if they wanted to progress to the final 10, then they had to emerge from their respective groups first and with 3 titled duos, including Kyangyu's Hangting, in Tang Wulian's group. It seems that this task was going to be more difficult for him. A faint smile appeared on Tang Wulian's face as he departed from the stadium. The round robin stage was about to commence. There were some ticket resellers that had begun to appear in Bright City leading up to the matches. With all of the effort the Spirit Pagoda was pouring into the event's promotion, ticket prices remained extremely high. At the same time, the Spirit Pagoda received news that the day of the round robin stage's commencement would also be the day that the Myriad Beast plane was opened. All soul masters who wanted to enter the Myriad Beast plane would have to pay a certain fee, which was obviously a very steep price, but most of the young high-grade soul masters in Bright City would definitely have enough disposable income to splurge on something like this. Each round of the round robin stage would take 5 days to complete, so all participants would have 5 days of rest between rounds. As such, even they would be able to enter the Myriad Beast plane during their rest days in order to enhance their soul spirits to put on a greater showing in the rest of the event. The Myriad Beast plane was scheduled to be open the next day, and all of the slots for the first day had already been reserved. According to the rules of the Myriad Beast plane, only 200 people could enter it per day, and the entry fee was 5 million federal credits per person, so 200 people equated to 1 billion federal credits per day. Generally speaking, around 10 million federal credits were required to craft a black mecha, so the Spirit Pagoda was essentially earning 100 black mechas per day from the Myriad Beast plane alone. Even the several thousand participants who had registered for the event alone would be enough to ensure that all slots were filled for the 45 days of the round robin stage, so the Spirit Pagoda was definitely going to be making a massive profit. Well done, Hangting, your entire plan is perfect. Kayangyu Dongfang couldn't be more pleased with his grandson. Kyangyu's Hangting was the one who had proposed and planned this joust for a spouse event, and everything had gone according to plan. Currently, the Myriad Beast plane was extremely popular, and the Spirit Pagoda kept 10 entry slots up its sleeve every day to be auctioned to those who needed them and had enough money to purchase them. Of course, those slots were going to cost far more than 5 million federal credits, and this idea had been proposed by Kyangyu's Hangting as well. Under these circumstances, the Myriad Beast plane would earn an astronomical sum of profit for the Spirit Pagoda within the next 2 months. Kyangyu's Hangting smiled and replied, "You can't shower me with all the accolades. Naya's contribution is integral to the plan's success as well. If she hadn't perfected the Myriad Beast plane, we wouldn't have been able to open it to the general public." Kayangyu Dongfang nodded in response. Naya's contribution is indeed vital. You two are a match made in heaven, and if you can emerge as first in your group, there will be a lot less opposition for you to inherit my position as chairman. Once you take over from me, I'm sure the two of you will be able to elevate the Spirit Pagoda to even greater heights. Yu Yuna smiled and said, rest assured, Chairman, Sang Ting is definitely going to be a very wise and astute leader for the Spirit Pagoda. Kaiangyu Dongfang chuckled. Can you finally call me grandfather once this event ends? I've been waiting to hear that from you for a very long time. Yu Yuna lowered her head as a blush appeared on her face. An entranced look appeared in Kaiangyu's Hanging's eyes as he looked at her, and he said, Grandfather, you can hear her call you that as many times as you want after I marry her. Kaiangyu Dongfang burst into elated laughter upon hearing this. By the way, Naya, make sure to keep an eye on the Myriad Beast plane so that nothing goes wrong. I'm sure everyone is aware that the entry fee of 5 million federal credits that we're charging isn't actually very high. Our main objective is to maintain the plane's stability. We have to give them some benefits, but not too much, and only then will they keep coming back for more. Rest assured, Chairman, I'll make sure to maintain a good balance. I've already made an agreement with the two rulers of that plane, and this is a mutually beneficial exchange for both sides. They require the energy that we provide them with to maintain the plane, so in comparison, they need us more than we need them, which is why I'm confident they wouldn't dare to break the agreement. Good. Those two planar rulers aren't easy to deal with. If four-word battle armor hadn't been invented, I would be very reluctant to collaborate with them. Make sure to take the Grand Elder with you when you go to meet them again. I'll be sure to look after myself. Yu Yuna assured with a smile. All right, I won't take up any more of your alone time. I'm going back to cultivate now. Kaiangyu Dongfang said as he rose to his feet before vanishing into a plume of smoke and mist. Following Kaiangyu Dongfang's departure, an excited look appeared on Kaiangyu's Hanging's face. We really did it. Nana, there's already a massive line outside the entrance of our Myriad Beast plane. I'm sure there would be just as many people lining up even if we were to raise the entry fee to 10 million. Yu Yuna smiled and said, there's no rush. We're keeping the price low so that more people can experience the benefits of the Myriad Beast plane. Only then will they become more hooked on the Myriad Beast plane. Kaiangyu's Hanging said, when that time comes, they'll become more and more dependent on our Spirit Pagoda. I wonder what they'd think if they knew that we could take away the enhancements their soul spirits experience in the Myriad Beast plane using the power of the plane. The more they benefit from the Myriad Beast plane, the more leverage we'll have against them. In around 10 years, we'll be able to control the entire Soulmaster world. When that time comes, no one will dare to oppose us as we can significantly dent their powers if we please. Chapter 1494. Shh, that's our most important secret. What if someone is eavesdropping on us? Yu Yuna hurriedly cautioned. Kaiangyu's Hanging chuckled. This is grandfather's office. There's no place with better security than here, so don't worry about anyone overhearing us. Nana, I really have to thank you. You're the one who planned this joust for a spouse event down to the very last detail. Yet you gave all the credit to me. Yu Yuna smiled and interjected, I'm just a woman, so I'm destined to stand behind a man. Your glory is my glory, is it not? You are the man who's going to become the Spirit Pagoda chairman, and without you, the chairman wouldn't have supported me in all my experiments, so the Myriad Beast plane wouldn't even exist. You deserve all the credit in the world. Kaiangyu's Hanging faltered slightly before a hint of excitement flashed through his eyes, and he spread his arms to try and embrace Yu Yuna. Yu Yuna looked up at him as purple light flashed within her eyes, and Kaiangyu's Hanging was stopped cold in his tracks as the same purple light flashed through his own eyes. I'm sorry, Nana, I didn't mean to offend you. You'll be mine at the end of this event anyway, so I can wait. It's just that I'm too excited. I can't wait to call you my wife. Yu Yuna replied with a gentle smile. You should go back and rest as well. You have some powerful competitors in your group, so don't get complacent. Kaiangyu's Hanging nodded in response. Don't worry, it's just you on you, isn't it? I'm going to crush him without giving him even a sliver of a chance. Boom. A bolt of rainbow lightning fell violently, sending spasms running through Tang Wulin's entire body. However, his hands didn't stop even for a single instant as he raised both of them in unison, guiding a much smaller bolt of rainbow lightning onto the piece of metal before him. Rainbow light flashed, and the metal seemed to have sprung to life as it rose up as a streak of rainbow light amid a cry of elation. The lightning clouds in the sky also slowly dissipated at this moment. The piece of metal now had rainbow light swirling all over its surface, and it would instantly change to any shape at Tang Wulin's behest, but it refused to stray far away from him. It seemed to be aware that it would have already perished if Tang Wulin hadn't bore the brunt of the elemental tribulation's power. Tang Wulin closed his eyes as he inspected his own bodily condition, as well as the changes in the power of laws within the piece of divine grade alloy that had just been successfully created. After practicing heavenly refinement for so many days, he was finally beginning to understand its true meaning. The elemental tribulation wasn't just something to test the piece of metal. Instead, it was something that allowed the metal to communicate with and feel the power of the laws of heaven and earth. These laws didn't just originate from this plane and this planet, they were imbued with a hint of the power of the universe as well. Furthermore, Tang Wulin discovered that the less he shielded the metal from the power of the elemental tribulation, the greater the effect would be once heavenly refinement was completed. Of course, this was a double-edged sword as the more elemental tribulation power the metal was exposed to, the greater the chance that it would be damaged. As a divine blacksmith, he had to find this balance, and the more he approached this fine line, the greater the effect of the heavenly refinement. Furthermore, the greater the number of metals used to create an alloy and the higher the harmony rate, the more fierce the elemental tribulation it would attract. Tang Wulin had already developed this theory during soul refinement, and it was verified now that he was capable of heavenly refinement. However, this didn't mean that the greater the physical tolerance of a piece of alloy, the easier heavenly refinement would be to complete. On the contrary, the greater the physical tolerance of a piece of alloy, the more fierce the elemental tribulation it would attract. Tang Wulin's physical tolerance was limited, and once the elemental tribulation exceeded that limit, even his son of nature physique wouldn't be able to help him, and this was a problem that he'd been struggling with of late. Having practiced heavenly refinement so extensively during this recent period of time, he was already somewhat confident that he would be able to begin forging suits of four-word battle armor for his friends. However, all of his friends had to reach the titled Dulo level first. Otherwise, their bodies wouldn't be able to handle suits of four-word battle armor anyway. Even though he was already a titled Dulo, he couldn't complete heavenly refinement for himself as too many metals were used for his Dragon Moonsong battle armor, and the alloys were also of an extremely high caliber, which would make heavenly refinement exceedingly difficult. Wasn't this one a resounding success? Why do you still look so unsatisfied? Zhenhua asked with a smile, looking at the piece of divine grade metal revolving around Tang Wulin. He simply couldn't muster up a stern expression. Tang Wulin's brows were tightly furrowed as he replied, it's not that I'm unsatisfied with this piece of metal, I'm unsatisfied with myself. Do you think I was too greedy? Uncle teacher, I used alloys comprised of 6 types of metals for my 3-word battle armor, and the harmony rate is over 90%. In order to upgrade it to a suit of 4-word battle armor, I'll have to incorporate at least one more type of metal. Even though I'm a divine blacksmith now, I can't forge a suit of 4-word battle armor for myself. Zhenhua chuckled in response. That's where you're wrong. The pursuit of forging is perfection. If I had your physical constitution and abilities, I would also pursue the same extremes. Just because you can't now doesn't mean you won't be able to in the future. The construction of your 4-word battle armor will have to be delayed, but I'm sure you'll be able to complete it through your own power someday. A wry smile appeared on Tang Wulin's face. Is it really possible? My current limit is completing heavenly refinement on alloys consisting of 3 types of metal. I've never succeeded with 4 metal alloys even once, and every time I fail, I sustain some injuries in the process. For my own suit of battle armor, there will be 7 types of metal, and the harmony rate will be even higher. How is that even possible? Zhenhua said in a meaningful voice. Wulin, what you have to realize is that you and I are different. The difference between us is that you'll be able to go further than me. Becoming a divine blacksmith isn't the end for us blacksmiths. There are different tiers of divine blacksmiths, just like there are different tiers of limit dulo. I've been a divine blacksmith for so many years, yet to put it frankly, even if I were to give everything I had and completely disregard all consequences, I would only be able to complete heavenly refinement on a piece of 4 metal alloy at most. That is my limit, and if I were to do that at my current age, I'd most likely have to rest for over a year. In contrast, you're only in your 20s. We're both divine blacksmiths, yet you have far more assets at your disposal than I do. You're a titled dulo who earned your power through arduous cultivation, and you possess spirit domain realm spiritual power. In my memory, there has never been a divine blacksmith who has reached the spirit domain realm before. On top of that, your soul spirit can help you absorb a part of the power of elemental tribulations. Your heavenly refinement success rate is already closing in on 40%. If the forefathers of our blacksmith world were to hear that you're still unsatisfied with this, they'd be rolling in their graves. An excited flash appeared on Zhenhua's face as he continued. What is heavenly refinement? It's true creation, an ability that only gods of creation possess. Even though our creation is on a very small scale, and we can only draw upon a sliver of the power of laws of heaven and earth, this ability is completely unique to our blacksmith occupation. I knew you were using many types of metals in your battle armor, and even succeeded in soul refinement later on. But do you know why I didn't stop you? Do you know why I didn't step in even though I knew you were making heavenly refinement exponentially harder for yourself? Oof. Tang Wuling shook his head with a blank expression. Zhen He explained, there are two reasons, the first of which is that I didn't even think you would be able to become a divine blacksmith. Ha! Tang Wuling's mouth gaped open upon hearing this. Chapter 1495. Zhen He smiled and said, you're very surprised, aren't you? There's actually a saying in the blacksmith world, which states that two divine blacksmiths can't exist in this world at the same time, so I'm sure you can imagine my shock when you succeeded that day. Why is that? Tang Wuling asked. It's due to the equilibrium in the laws of heaven and earth. Even though we possess only an extremely watered-down version of the power of a god of creation, it's still the power of creation. How many people like us do you think the plane will allow to exist at one time? If there were too many of us, the entire world's equilibrium would be thrown into disarray. In reality, the invention of four-word battle armor is one of the main culprits behind the extinction of the soul beasts. Without four-word battle armor, all those top-tier soul beasts wouldn't be completely dominated by us. As for the second reason behind why I didn't stop you from using so many metals, it's because I know what you're capable of. When I can no longer complete heavenly refinement, I am confident that you'll succeed me as the next divine blacksmith. When that time comes, you'll have established an extremely solid foundation, and your breakthrough would open up a whole new world. At that point, you would need a new target to pursue. No one in history has been able to complete heavenly refinement on a piece of 7 metal alloy. The record is 6. You're the greatest prodigy I've ever seen. So why can't you create this piece of history? I have great ambitions for you, and even though I won't be able to pursue these goals, my life will be complete if my successor can do all this in my stead. After I became a divine blacksmith, this is the only thing that can still get me so excited. Hence, never give up and never think that you can't or that you want to compromise. If you allow those thoughts to set in, you'll never be able to reach that unprecedented peak. The fact that two divine blacksmiths have appeared at once indicates that the laws of this world have been heavily disrupted, and it could lead to disaster. As the one who has been chosen by the plane, you may have to shoulder the duty of saving this entire plane in the future. Hence, you can never look back. No matter how difficult things become, you must continue to advance onward. You will succeed. It may not be now, but you'll definitely succeed in the future. You're only a tidal duelo now, so what would your physical tolerance be like as a hyper duelo? What type of elemental tribulation would you be able to endure then? How can you put a cap on your own potential and declare that you can't complete heavenly refinement on a 7 metal alloy? I believe that you can do it. Zhen He was becoming more and more excited as he spoke, and it was the first time that Tang Wuling had ever seen him like this. He had begun learning forging at 6 years of age, and he could still clearly recall how badly his hands had hurt on his first day. The recollection of the layers upon layers of calluses and countless blisters still remained fresh in his mind. However, he persevered in order to become a soul master. He took one arduous step after another and finally reached the pinnacle of the blacksmith world. Forging was no longer just an occupation for him. It was something that he truly loved, and this passion was the best form of motivation. His uncle teacher was right. Just because he couldn't now didn't mean that he couldn't in the future. So what if his rise to become a four-word battle armor master would have to be delayed? Once he completed his suit of four-word battle armor with 7 metal alloys, he would stand at the pinnacle of this entire world. A frenetic look began to appear in Tang Wuling's eyes, and Zhen He nodded in a pleased manner at the sight of the flames that had been ignited in Tang Wuling's eyes. He had already said enough. The rest would be up to Tang Wuling himself. The round-robin stage of the joust for a spouse event officially commenced, and even though it was only the first day, things had already become very intense. In the first group, a match had concluded with one participant having an entire arm destroyed and a huge hole blasted into their stomach and chest. If it weren't for the healing system soul masters on the scene, he would have perished. At the same time, the Myriad Beast plane was opened in a grandiose ceremony, and the first entrance was set up in Bright City. As for where other entrances were going to be set up, that information had been withheld by the Spirit Pagoda. Thus, 200 people rushed in the Myriad Beast plane, and the one who lasted the shortest was evicted in 15 minutes, while the one who lasted the longest stayed in the plane for 7 hours. After he left the Myriad Beast plane, one of his soul rings had evolved from the 100-year level to the 1,000-year level. 5 million was quite a hefty price, but it was definitely tolerable for high-grade soul masters. Furthermore, everyone discovered that power wasn't the key to lasting longer in the Myriad Beast plane. The one who had lasted 7 hours was only a soul emperor. So what was the most important factor? It was luck. If one were to run into a 100,000-year-old soul beast as soon as they entered the plane, then that would be terrible luck. However, those with better luck and didn't encounter any powerful soul beasts would be able to last longer. Each person who entered the Myriad Beast plane would be given a badge, just like in the Spirit Ascension plane, and they could activate the badge to teleport themselves out of the plane in the face of insurmountable peril. This made things far safer than they were during the examinations. The first day of matches concluded, and there were virtually no upsets. Those who had managed to progress past the elimination stage were not only all very powerful, they also possessed extensive battle experience, so it wouldn't be an easy task to score an upset. In contrast, the second day received more attention than the first day as the matches for the third group were going to take place. According to the match sequence, they would only clash in the final round of the stage, but even so, the matches in the group were still heavily anticipated, and the prices of resale tickets spiked by over 30%. Of course, there was also interest generated by the fact that Lan Fuozi of the fourth group would also be making an appearance. Her clash with Tang Wuling had become a very hot topic for fans of the event, and her matches were also undoubtedly going to draw a lot of attention. That night, prior to the second day of the competition, Tang Wuling was strolling along the streets of Bright City with his hands in his pockets. This was the first time he had taken such a leisurely stroll since his arrival at Bright City, and the reason for this was very simple. He had to take a break to relax. During this recent period of time, Tang Wuling had constantly been alternating between heavenly refinement and cultivation, thereby leaving him with almost no time for rest. He was absorbing power from elemental tribulations every single day, so both he and the Infernal Lightning Vine were in a state of saturation. Even with the Infernal Lightning Vine's love for lightning, it was struggling to keep up. Thankfully, Tang Wuling also had 3 other soul spirits. After the terrifying destructive power of the tribulation lightning was filtered by Tang Wuling and the Infernal Lightning Vine, the remaining essence was very beneficial to those soul spirits as well. Chapter 1496. With those soul spirits taking a part of the load, Tang Wuling and the Infernal Lightning Vine were able to absorb this power at a slightly faster rate. At night, Bright City was a very luxurious setting, but Tang Wuling was still feeling rather lonely as he walked on the streets by himself. If only she were with him, they didn't need to do anything. He would be satisfied if he could simply walk hand in hand with her. A faint smile appeared on his face. That dream was definitely something that he would achieve someday. All of a sudden, a resounding boom rang out in the distance, and Tang Wuling's pupils contracted as he instantly began to circulate his soul power within his own body. However, he was quickly greeted by the sight of a ball of light rising up into the air before exploding into resplendent fireworks, followed by a loud chorus of cheers. Only then did Tang Wuling recall that there was a certain festival taking place on this day. The word festival was something that Tang Wuling rarely ever thought about. He couldn't even remember the last festival he had experienced. He only vaguely recalled enjoying festivals as a child with his parents and Naya. They very rarely bought any fireworks as they were too expensive, and in order to save money, they would only buy smaller and safer fireworks for him and Naya to set off. A forlorn look appeared in Tang Wuling's eyes at the thought of his parents. In reality, he was even more attached to Tang Xiran and Lang Yue than he was to his birth parents. After all, Tang Xiran and Lang Yue had given him the warmth of a family and parental love. Tang Wuling heaved a faint sigh, and his aura began to fluctuate in a slightly unsteady manner. Father, mother, no matter where you are, I'll find you. After speaking with his birth father, he had realized that he had to set his sights beyond the stars. Boom, boom. 2 more fireworks were set off, and the entire city was filled with a festive atmosphere. All of a sudden, Tang Wuling caught a whiff of a faint meaty aroma, and he followed it to a small rotisserie. Even before walking into the rotisserie, he was already carefully considering what he was going to eat. With so much pressure on his shoulders, just the simple luxury of dining out instilled him with a profound sense of happiness. This was a very ordinary part of many people's lives, but for him, it was a rare break from all of his crushing responsibilities. In the end, he decided to order a portion of every type of roast meat along with some iced ale. Every type of meat had a different aroma and different juices, and just this mere thought was making him salivate. It seemed that he really was hungry. Due to the festivities taking place in the city, the rotisserie was packed to the rafters, and Tang Wuling had to wait in line for a seat. Thankfully, the line wasn't very long. Each table in the rotisserie had a stove that was fitted with a metal frame, atop which meat could be roasted. Chunks of marinated meat were placed on the red-hot frame, and the entire rotisserie was filled with the alluring aroma of roast meat. The glasses of ale being brought out to the customers were each covered in a layer of frost, indicating that the glasses had been frozen before the ale had been poured into them in order to preserve the ale's original flavor. The rotisserie was quite small, but its attention to detail was very much worthy of praise. Tang Wuling looked around at the customers munching on chunks of roast meat, and he couldn't help but gulp with a look of yearning in his eyes. Dining on delicious food provided enjoyment of the highest order for humans, and eating was the most important and satisfying activity in everyone's life. Just as Tang Wuling was waiting in the line, he suddenly felt a slight hint of sharp pain on his skin, and he reflexively cast his gaze toward a certain direction. To his surprise, there was a familiar person enjoying a meal there. However, she was glowering directly at him while munching on roast meat, and that burst of sharp pain was a result of none other than her intense gaze. That person was none other than Lan Fawzi. Tang Wuling's heart stirred slightly upon seeing this, and he made his way over to her table before taking a seat across from her. Who said you could sit there? Lan Fawzi protested in an angry manner. Tang Wuling smiled and said, "Fate has brought us together again, and this seat is vacant anyway, so why don't we eat together?" He was very curious about Lan Fawzi's origins, and the Tang sect had investigated her at his request, but were unable to find out anything about her. A tidal Dullo with spirit domain realm spiritual power who was only in her 20s was definitely someone who was worthy of attention, and with her foundation, it was very likely that she would become a new limit Dullo in the future. "You're ruining my appetite. Go away," Lan Fawzi said with a cold look on her face. Tang Wuling chuckled. "Is this how you speak to someone who saved your life? I already repaid the favor, so neither of us owes the other anything," Lan Fawzi countered. Tang Wuling said, "All right, then let's restart from the beginning. My name is Oolong Yu, and I come from the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon clan." He extended a hand toward Lan Fawzi with a friendly smile on his face as he spoke. Lan Fawzi faltered slightly before grumbling. "How are you so shameless? I already told you that you're not welcome here." "All right, then I'll just sit here for now, and I'll leave once another table opens up," Tang Wuling replied with a smile. Lan Fawzi was just about to say something when Tang Wuling's soul communicator suddenly lit up. He accepted the call and only listened for a few seconds before his smile was completely replaced by a grim expression, and he abruptly stood up before departing. "Hey, where are you going?" Lan Fawzi was rather taken aback to see this. It was the first time she had ever seen Tang Wuling display such a grim expression, and she was very intrigued. Tang Wuling merely waved at her in a gesture of farewell before quickly rushing out of the rotisserie. After exiting the rotisserie, he immediately accelerated and rushed toward a certain direction, ignoring all of the attention that he was drawing by doing so. However, he hadn't gone far before he suddenly asked, "Why did you follow me?" Lan Fawzi had caught up to him, and she replied with a smug smile, "Does this street have your name on it? I'm just going for a jog to help me digest my meal." Tang Wuling rolled his eyes and said in a serious voice, "I'd advise you not to follow me. I have some private matters to take care of. Then fight me, and I'll stop following you if you beat me." Lan Fawzi replied with a smug expression. Tang Wuling had no time for something like this. Lan Fawzi was quite powerful, so it would take him quite a while to defeat her. On top of that, they were in a very densely populated area, so fighting here would definitely attract unnecessary trouble that would delay him from getting to where he needed to be. As such, he could only ignore Lan Fawzi and accelerate before rising up into the air, jumping onto one skyscraper after another as he rushed toward his destination. Lan Fawzi followed along close behind him. "You're not getting rid of me that easily." For some reason, Tang Wuling's frustrated display gave her a lot of pleasure. Thus, the two of them quickly rushed toward the same direction together. "Has your location changed?" Tang Wuling made a call with his soul communicator, then continued to accelerate upon receiving confirmation from the other end. At their speed, it didn't take them long to make it to the outskirts of Bright City. There were far less people in this part of the city, but the roads were still very congested as it was peak hour, and most of the less affluent residents of the city lived in this area. Soon, a lush forest appeared in the distance. Of course, this wasn't actually some primitive forest. It was a park in Bright City instead. The park was surrounded by a metal fence, but that was naturally instantly bypassed by Tang Wuling and Lan Fawzi. After entering the park, Tang Wuling immediately released his spiritual power before rushing toward a certain direction. Chapter 1497. Lan Fawzi trailed along directly behind him. Speed was clearly one of her fortes, so she was able to easily keep up with Tang Wuling. There was a lake in the forest, and at this moment, there was a group of people standing beside the lake. To Lan Fawzi's surprise, she recognized one of those people. The people beside the lake were clearly split up into two opposing factions with over 10 people on one side, and only 2 people on the other. The 2 people were both young men who appeared to be in their 20s, and the group that opposed them was led by a burly and imposing elderly man. Even though the elderly man was merely standing still on the spot, he resembled a gargantuan pillar that immediately drew one's attention. Even with Tang Wuling and Lan Fawzi's powers, they were instantly struck by a sense of oppressive pressure at the sight of him. This elderly man was definitely extremely powerful. Tang Wuling arrived in quick succession beside the pair of young men, and their sudden arrival naturally drew the attention of the opposing group. A hint of surprise appeared in the elderly man's eyes at the sight of Tang Wuling and Lan Fawzi, while the 2 young men were elated to see them. "You're Yuan Hui, right?" Lan Fawzi asked with a perplexed expression before turning to Tang Wuling. "You know each other." Indeed, the 2 young men beside the lake were none other than Yuan and Yui and Shishi, the latter of whom had made the call to Tang Wuling. "Why did you call for these allies, Yuan? Are you planning to resist?" A middle-aged man standing beside the elderly man yelled. A stubborn look appeared in Yuan and Yui's eyes. "He's my friend. I'm not going back with you." The middle-aged man became even more enraged. "How dare you act so rude in the presence of your grandfather? That's enough." The elderly man raised his hand to cut off the middle-aged man. He then continued, "Come back with me and change your name, and I can spare your second martial soul." Yuan and Yui suddenly became very emotional upon hearing this. "No. I won't change my name. I was no longer a part of your family from the day that I left. It's been so many years. Why did you come to look for me? I have no connection to you. My name was given to me by my mother, and my surname was inherited from my father. No one has a right to take those away from me. I won't go back with you even if the only alternative is death." Tang Wuling's brows furrowed slightly as he assessed the scene unfolding before him. Due to the urgency of the situation, Shishi had given him a very brief message, informing him that Yuan and Yui's family had come to look for her, and that the situation was very troublesome. Everyone had known each other for a very long time, so Tang Wuling was aware of the family situation of Shishi, Xu Xiaoyun, Yue Sengyu, Yu Xinglin, and Xu Lizhi, but no one knew what the family situation was like for Yuan and Yui. She never revealed this information, and it was inappropriate to pry into such matters. However, both of Yuan and Yui's martial souls were top-tier existences, so everyone had always suspected that she had quite a complex family history. This was the first time that Tang Wuling had seen Yuan and Yui's family, and this certainly didn't appear to be an ordinary family. With his wealth of knowledge and experience, Tang Wuling was certain that the elderly man currently standing before him was a limit Dullo. Only a limit Dullo would be able to exert so much pressure on him, and also completely disregard him and Lan Fawzi even after detecting their spirit domain realm spiritual powers. According to what the middle-aged man had just said, this elderly man was Yuan and Yui's grandfather. A family that possessed a limit Dullo had to be an extremely powerful one. But what was very perplexing to Tang Wuling was that he had no recollection of ever hearing about such a family on this continent. This suggested that Yuan and Yui's family was also a hidden family like the Blue Lightning Tyrant Dragon clan, except it wasn't as renowned. "So you're unwilling to come with me?" the elderly man confirmed in an indifferent voice. Yuan and Yui replied without any hesitation, "I'd sooner die than come with you." The elderly man continued, "You've inherited our family's bloodline, and your power was bestowed upon you by this bloodline. If you're unwilling to return to your family, then I'll disable you and capture you by force." Yuan and Yui raised her head with a cold look in her eyes. "Just like what you did to my father, right?" The elderly man's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and a complex look flashed through his eyes. Yet before he could reply, the middle-aged man beside him flared up with rage. "You don't know anything, you little brat." He rushed toward Yuan and Yui as he spoke, and the air seemed to grow heavier around him as his right arm abruptly thickened while he reached toward Yuan and Yui's shoulder with his right hand. This was rather similar to the style of battle employed by the body sect. Yuan and Yui pursed her lips tightly with a cold expression and stepped forward with her left foot before retaliating with a punch of her own. Her enormous strength and soul power converged, and she unleashed her devastating divine cloud vortex fist. However, the middle-aged man was also very powerful, and yellow light radiated from his entire body as his arm abruptly expanded once again, threatening to envelop Yuan and Yui's entire body. Tang Wuling had seen Yuan and Yui used this technique before. It was Titan Grip. They really were from the same family. Formidable power instantly erupted from Yuan Yui's divine cloud vortex fist, and the powerful vortex was filled with repulsive power. Her body hadn't expanded at all, but the energy from her fist was proliferating outward to match the Titan Grip. A dull thump rang out, and Yuan Yui was forced back 2 steps, while the middle-aged man was stopped cold in his tracks. At this point, he had already revealed his soul rings, which consisted of 3 purples and 6 blacks. This was a tidal duo. The middle-aged man was quite taken aback to be stopped in his tracks, clearly surprised by Yuan Yui's strength. However, he then harumphed coldly before rushing toward Yuan Yui again, but he had only taken a single step before his expression changed slightly, and he stopped once again. At the same time, he lashed out with a punch to his right, and a crisp clang rang out as a figure emerged out of thin air. She sprang back and landed beside Yuan Yui with a cold expression. Even if you're her family, you have no right to make her do anything against their will. Who are you? The middle-aged man asked in a cold voice. At the same time, he was surprised by just how stealthy she had remained while unleashing his attack. On top of that, he hadn't been aiming for a vital region, so he was clearly holding back. This was the first time he had ever encountered anyone with such proficient concealment ability, and what was even more remarkable was that he was only a soul duo. She replied, "I'm her boyfriend." She. The middle-aged man faltered slightly upon hearing this, and he turned toward the elderly man. Lan Foizi was even more astonished to hear this as in her eyes. Both Yuan Yui and Shishi were men. Chapter 1498. Tang Wuling stepped forward and positioned himself in front of Yuan Yui and Shishi. "I'm sure there's some kind of misunderstanding here. You are Yuan's family, so why can't you settle this with words rather than violence?" The middle-aged man countered, "This has nothing to do with you. She has to come back with us. Otherwise." The elderly man interjected, "All right, that's enough. Yuanan has to come with us. That's non-negotiable. Yuanan, do you intend to make me capture you by force? Do you think these little brats will be able to stop me?" A complex look appeared on Yuan Yui's face, and she glanced at Shishi and Tang Wuling before stepping forward to stand beside Tang Wuling. "I'll go with them, Captain." Tang Wuling turned toward her to discover a hint of finality in her eyes. This definitely wasn't the expression of a tantrum-throwing brat who had run away from home. The look in her eyes suggested that she was ready to die. No one is taking you anywhere if I can help it." The middle-aged man scoffed in a cold voice. "You sure are a cocky brat. Let me see if you can back up that big mouth of yours. Can you be any more annoying?" Before Tang Wuling had a chance to respond, a figure suddenly charged toward the middle-aged man before thrusting a gentle palm toward him. Yellow light flashed from the middle-aged man's body, and he unleashed a slow-looking punch in retaliation. The fist and palm clashed, and the middle-aged man's expression changed drastically as he stumbled a couple of steps to the side. Immediately thereafter, he felt as if a vision of a boundless ocean had appeared before his eyes, and palm projections were crashing down upon him like a tsunami wave. If it were just a wave, then he wouldn't be phased, but all of the palm projections within the wave were rotating in different directions, and they were all interconnected, looking as if they would explode upon contact. Even the elderly man was stunned by the sight of such an attack. He had already sensed that Tang Wuling and Lan Foizi were tidal duo, and he had also detected their spirit domain realm spiritual power. However, tidal duos were still far inferior to limit duo, so he didn't pay them much heed. However, the power displayed by Lan Foizi was comparable to that of a hyper duo, and it was undoubtedly the case that he was a brilliant prodigy. The middle-aged man let loose a furious roar as his first, third, and fifth soul rings lit up in unison. His body then swelled drastically in size as he instantly transformed into a terrifying Titan giant ape. Immediately thereafter, he unleashed several dozens of punches in rapid succession, trying to quell the oncoming attack through brute strength. However, the palm projections hurtling toward him were filled with rotational power that quickly nullified the force of his attacks, and as the vortexes approached him, he could sense that the protective soul power around himself was about to be torn apart. In this dire situation, golden light flashed from his body, and he crossed his arms to form a barricade in front of himself. A string of resounding booms rang out as the vortexes struck his body, and he was only just barely able to withstand Lan Foizi's attack. With that one palm alone, Lan Foizi had shocked everyone present. Even Tang Wuling was astonished by her overwhelming attack. Yuan Yui's divine cloud vortex fists also derived their power from rotation, but it was clearly lacking in that regard compared to Lan Foizi's attack. Thinking back to the wave of palm projections, Yuan Yui couldn't help but consider how she would react if she had to face such an attack. The middle-aged man was forced back several steps, and the fury in his eyes had been replaced by shock. Were the young people of this generation this powerful? He was a rank 93 tidal duo, yet he had been forced back by just a single attack. "You're nothing much." Lan Foizi scoffed with a derisive expression. The elderly man's expression darkened upon hearing this. "Don't get cocky, little brat. You'd have no chance if my eldest son were here." Lan Foizi replied in a cold voice. "How about you feeling for him then? I hate restrictive parents like you." The elderly man's brows furrowed slightly, and he nodded in response. "All right, watch carefully." As he uttered the words "watch carefully," he had shifted his gaze to Yuan Yui. After that, he raised a hand and pointed a finger toward Lan Foizi in a very simple and straightforward manner. Lan Foizi harumphed coldly as she unleashed another wave of palm projections, but this one was clearly more powerful than the previous one. Even Tang Wuling could clearly sense the terrifying power imbued within the vortexes, and the most fearsome aspect of this attack was the fact that all of the vortexes enhanced one another. The attack required immense power to unleash, and incredible spiritual power to control. However, the elderly man paid no heed to this and merely continued to extend his finger toward Lan Foizi. Lan Foizi was very proud, but she knew that she was facing a limit duo, so she was giving this attack her all and hadn't allowed any complacency to set in. As such, she was very careful and made sure to control each and every vortex so that they exploded at the perfect moments. Yellow light began to radiate from the finger, and the vortexes exerted all types of different force upon it, but it remained completely unfazed. At the same time, it continued to advance slowly toward Lan Foizi like a sluggish, immovable mountain. Bam! All of the vortexes were instantly shattered, and Lan Foizi stumbled back 7 or 8 steps before falling onto her backside. The elderly man remained at his position and withdrew his finger as he said in an indifferent voice, "An immovable pillar cannot be swayed by any force. Do you understand?" Tang Wuling took a deep breath, and he was suddenly struck by a strong urge to challenge this elderly man. That finger strike appeared to have been very simple, but it had completely stunned him. There was no embellishment or special technique, nor any soul skills used. The finger had simply been filled with unmatched intent and pure, unadulterated power. The attack perfectly embodied the power of a strength-type soul master. It was undoubtedly the case that the Titan giant ape was a strength-type martial soul, and for him to have cultivated such a martial soul to the limit duo level meant that he cultivated his strength to the limit. This was the first time that Tang Wuling had ever met a strength-type limit duo, and he was very eager to challenge him. Lan Foizi sat on the ground with a blank look on her face. She hadn't been injured, but her spirit had been crushed. This so-called immovable pillar was similar to her family's integration of all rotations, but she was still very far from reaching that level. Yet the elderly man had already accomplished it. He was truly very powerful. Yuan Yui was looking directly at the elderly man. Everything he had just done had been a demonstration for her. Is he teaching me? Come back with me, the elderly man said to Yuan Yui before turning and walking away into the darkness. "Boss." Shishi yelled in a frantic manner. The elderly man was too powerful, and he could only place his hope in Tang Wuling. "Please wait, senior," Tang Wuling said in a respectful voice. The elderly man had won his respect through his display of power, and on top of that, he was Yuan Yui's grandfather. The elderly man turned his head toward Tang Wuling and said, "You're quite exceptional as well, but you're still too young. This is truly a golden generation. Yuan is necessary to continue our bloodline, so I won't do anything to harm her. However, she must come back with me." Chapter 1499. Tang Wuling took a deep breath and said, "How about we make a bet, senior?" An intrigued look appeared on the elderly man's face. "A bet? You have no right." The middle-aged man yelled in an enraged voice. However, Tang Wuling simply ignored him and continued, "If I can take 3 of your attacks, then you won't take Yuan away. Otherwise, I won't intervene any further. What do you think?" The elderly man's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this, and the middle-aged man scoffed. "You think you have what it takes to challenge my father?" Tang Wuling turned to him and said, "All right, you can take his place then. If you can take 3 of my attacks, then I'll let you take Yuan away." The middle-aged man was furious to hear this, and he was just about to respond when a burst of pressure converged all around him, forcing him to swallow his words. "I can tell you're a very confident young man, but I won't take on your bet. Yuan must come with me. That's non-negotiable." The elderly man replied. Tang Wuling's expression changed slightly upon hearing this, and he realized that this was a rather troublesome situation. Just as he was about to say something further, a voice suddenly rang out in the distance. "Accept the bet." Otherwise, you won't be able to take her with you. A streak of light flashed in the distance, and it seemed to be a sword that was giving off a type of peculiar emotional fluctuations, affecting everyone's emotions to a certain extent with its mere presence. A figure that wore a graceful and refined smile then appeared beside Tang Wuling amid a flash of light, and it was none other than Amorous Duo Zhang Xin. Tang Wuling wasn't surprised at all by Zhang Xin's arrival, as he was the one who had asked Zhang Xin to come here. Shishi's frantic cry for help was a clear indication that he and Yuan and Yui were facing extremely powerful opponents. Tang Wuling wasn't going to take a risk with the lives of his friends on the line, so he had contacted the Amorous Duo right away. The Amorous Duo had accompanied them to Bright City for the Joust for a spouse event, and a serious look appeared on the elderly man's face for the first time at the sight of him. Both of them were Limit Duo, so even if there were a disparity between their powers, it would be very difficult for him to take Yuan away. On top of that, a full-blown battle between Limit Duos would definitely receive attention from the officials of the city, thereby escalating the matter, and no one wanted to see that happen. Thus, after considering the situation for a brief moment, the elderly man nodded in response. Zhang Xin patted Tang Wuling on the shoulder and offered him some words of encouragement before backing away. The elderly man's entourage also slowly backed away along with Tang Wuling's friends and Lan Foizi. Shishi pumped his fist toward Tang Wuling in encouragement, and he was even more nervous than Yuan and Yui. A slightly forlorn look flashed through the elderly man's eyes as he gently shook his head before stepping forward. Are you ready? As a powerful being of his caliber, he naturally wasn't going to stoop to unleashing surprise attacks. Tang Wuling took a deep breath to prime his soul core, dragon core, and spiritual power in order to ensure he was in his best condition. I'm ready. Please go ahead. The elderly man didn't waste any more time and raised his right hand before pointing a finger toward Tang Wuling. Only when truly facing this finger strike would Tang Wuling experience everything that Lan Foizi had just felt. The sluggish finger really was like an immovable pillar, and everything around it seemed to have paled into insignificance. At the highest level, everything returned to a state of simplicity, and this finger strike epitomized this concept. It was a very simple movement, but it was completely unavoidable, and it felt as if resistance were destined to be futile. Of course, Tang Wuling wasn't going to try and evade it anyway. That wasn't his style of battle. He took a deep breath and slowly took a step forward as he lowered his own center of gravity. He clenched his right hand into a fist, and also threw a simple straight punch. As he did so, a low dragon's roar rang out, and everyone present felt their own blood churn within their bodies. It was as if there really were a giant dragon residing within Tang Wuling's body, and it had been awakened as he unleashed his straight punch. The dragon's roar was filled with boundless authority, and Tang Wuling's eyes had already turned golden in color. A series of golden scales appeared over his right fist, and each scale glistened like the surface of a mirror. In the face of enormous pressure exerted upon him by the immovable pillar, he had entered a peculiar state. In his mind, it was as if all of his skills and abilities had instantly fused as one. Path of regal domination, all or nothing, fury of the masses, and all of his golden dragon king abilities, everything was infused into this one punch. His essence, energy, and spirit were condensed, and he was focusing on the feeling of refining his own body during the final moments of his elemental tribulations. Boom. The fist and finger clashed, and the entire space seemed to have congealed for an instant. Everyone was focused intently on the clash, not just to see the outcome, but also to learn from a clash of this lofty caliber. In the instant that the clash took place, it was as if time and space had completely fallen still. However, in the next instant, a thunderous boom rang out, and it was only limited to a very small area, but a black hole with a diameter of over 3 meters had suddenly appeared. Enormous suction force erupted forth in all directions, and all of the plants in a diameter of 100 meters were uprooted before instantly being devoured by the black hole. Thankfully, all of the people present were powerful soul masters, and they were able to stabilize themselves with their own soul power. In the aftermath of the clash, Tang Wuling was sent flying like a flashing golden cannonball for several hundred meters. However, even the short-tempered middle-aged man couldn't muster up a disdainful expression anymore. Lan Foizi had only been forced back several steps by the same attack, yet Tang Wuling had been completely sent flying. So on the surface, it seemed that Tang Wuling had fared far worse than Lan Foizi had. However, all of the people present were powerful enough to see that the elderly man's finger strike had only pushed Lan Foizi back a few steps as he had been able to control and rein in his power, whereas Tang Wuling had been sent flying as the elderly man was forced to unleash his power and was therefore unable to hold back. This meant that he had been forced to oppose Tang Wuling's punch with his full power. A complex look appeared in Lan Foizi's eyes upon seeing this, and the elderly man was also very astonished. He finally understood why Tang Wuling was so confident. That punch of his had already incorporated the concept of returning to simplicity. Could it be that he had grasped this concept after only seeing his immovable pillar once? The majority of hyper duos hadn't even grasped this concept, and this ability was virtually limited only to limit duos. A hint of elation appeared in Zhang Xin's eyes. With him present on the scene, the elderly man naturally wouldn't try to kill Tang Wuling, and the pressure of battling a limit duo would benefit Tang Wuling immensely in his development. In particular, this was a limit duo who had no ties with him, so the pressure was even greater. Chapter 1500. Compared to his original style of battle, that simple punch that he had unleashed was already a clear improvement that heralded his rise to the top. In the distance, Tang Wuling slowly clambered to his feet. At this moment, his entire body felt extremely heavy, as if there were a massive mountain weighing down upon his chest. What dense soul power! This was probably what it actually felt like to be struck by a mountain. He had faced many limit duo in the past, including even quasi-gods like Infernal King Duo Harissa, but this was the first time he had encountered one with such incredible strength. This made him realize that his own strength was still far from reaching the peak. His Golden Dragon King bloodline was fluctuating violently, as if it were under immense pressure, and even his 14th Golden Dragon King seal had become slightly cracked. This was the proud Golden Dragon King's instinctive response to being provoked. This elderly man was at least a demigod, and he was most likely even more powerful than the Amorous Duo and Heartless Duo. Perhaps his powers were comparable to those of the Boundless Ocean Duo. Tang Wuling began to make his way back to everyone else, and initially, his body was slightly hunched over. However, as he took one step after another, a peculiar scene began to unfold. A layer of golden light gradually rose up from his body before gradually glowing brighter and brighter, and during this process, his back gradually straightened as a determined look appeared in his eyes. The middle-aged man's eyes widened upon seeing this. He had just been struck by the elderly man's immovable pillar, yet he was still able to walk and looked as if he hadn't even sustained any injuries. He had no choice but to admit that he really was no match for this young man. What was going on with the youngsters these days? Were they determined to upstage the older generation? What a bunch of freaks. The elderly man looked on at Tang Wuling's approaching figure, and he nodded as he said, Yuanan is very fortunate to have friends like you. He very rarely praised anyone in his life, and his entourage were all stunned to hear this. It seemed that the last person that the elderly man praised was Yuan and Yui's father, and that had happened several decades ago. Ever since that event, the elderly man had never praised anyone else, nor did he ever smile again. However, he was now praising an outsider and involving Yuan in his praise as well. Yuan and Yui was just as astonished to see this. In her memory, her grandfather had always been stubborn, dogmatic, and completely emotionless, to the extent that he didn't even seem human anymore. Was this man really still her grandfather? Of course, she had never been willing to admit that she had such a grandfather. Finally, Tang Wuling returned to his original spot. At this point, golden scales had already appeared all over his body, and he raised his right hand, upon which his golden dragon spear appeared amid a flash of golden light. He couldn't hold back any longer, even if it meant exposing himself to Lan Foizi. If he didn't use his weapon, he had no confidence in his own ability to withstand the elderly man's next two attacks. If he had a choice, he would rather face Holy Dragon Duo NC, Amorous Duo Zhang Xin, or even Light Dark Duo Lan Yeyu than this elderly man. That wasn't to say that he was more powerful than all three of them. It was just that his absolute strength was exerting crushing pressure upon Tang Wuling. However, with this immense pressure came motivation in equal measure, and he knew that facing such an opponent would benefit him immensely in his development. That punch he had just unleashed embodied the return to simplicity he had been searching for. Of course, it would take more time for him to master this concept, but at the very least, he was on the right track. He had integrated all of his abilities and assets, including his Blue Silver Emperor, Golden Dragon King bloodline, Golden Dragon Spear, and spiritual power. What he wanted to achieve the most was the same feeling as the elderly man's immovable pillar. Of course, he didn't want the exact same ability, but he wanted to achieve the same thing in principle. As such, that finger strike had not only been instructional to Yuan and Yui, he had also benefited immensely from witnessing it. However, after withstanding the first attack, Tang Wuling knew that he couldn't replicate what he had done for a second time. This elderly man was extremely determined to take Yuan and Yui away, so Tang Wuling would have to draw upon even more power to withstand this second attack. Thus, he slowly raised his golden dragon spear, and the golden light around him faded while the golden dragon spear darkened in color. The elderly man appraised Tang Wuling with an intense gaze, and announced, second attack. As soon as his voice trailed off, he abruptly stepped forward and sent a palm crashing down upon Tang Wuling. The attack was still as simple as ever, but from Tang Wuling's perspective, it felt as if the entire sky were falling upon his head. He felt like he was facing the entire world, rather than just a single person. His breathing was instantly cut off, and he was being crushed by enormous pressure. This was the true power of a strength type limit duelo. There was clearly no change in gravity, but Tang Wuling was left feeling impossibly heavy. None of the spectators could feel the same pressure. Only those who were above the title duelo level or possessed sufficiently potent spiritual power could sense some of the pressure that was weighing down upon Tang Wuling. Zhang Xin's expression changed slightly, and he involuntarily took a small step toward Tang Wuling. Would he be able to withstand such an attack? Right at this moment, Tang Wuling suddenly let loose a thunderous roar, and his eyes turned crimson as a crimson golden halo emerged beneath his feet. At the same time, his suit of three-word battle armor instantly appeared over his entire body. His Dragon Moon Song battle armor was comprised of 6 metal alloys, placing it far above normal suits of three-word battle armor. He raised his golden dragon spear before thrusting it upward, and at the same time, another spear appeared in his left hand amid a flash of white light. With his left hand, he was unleashing fury of the masses, and with his right hand came path of regal domination. At the same time, the flow of time around Tang Wuling also suddenly changed. However, instead of being reversed, it had been accelerated. Reversal of time was naturally very important in battle, but at times, a sudden acceleration in the passage of time could create an unexpected effect that could throw off his opponent's rhythm and timing. Right at this moment, the two spears clashed with the descending palm. Bam! A palm-shaped crater with a diameter of 10 meters instantly appeared on the ground, and Tang Wuling abruptly vanished into the earth like a nail. Boss, Captain, Oolong Yu. 3 cries of alarm rang out in unison from Shishi, Yuan and Yui, and Lan Foizi, respectively. If it weren't for Zhang Xin raising a hand to stop them, they would have already rushed toward Tang Wuling. Meanwhile, the elderly man stood on the spot with a peculiar look on his face as he mused. What a crafty little brat. All of a sudden, a beam of golden light erupted out of the crater alongside a thunderous dragon's roar. Immediately thereafter, Tang Wuling flew out with his golden wings spread open, then landed on the ground nearby. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.